I think you should go home to Greenbow, Alabama.
It sure feels good to be back in the heart of Dixie.
Alabama became a state in the year 1819.
A state that can produce giants like George Washington Carver, Helen Keller, Joe Louis, Bear Bryant.
We dare defend our rights.
Well, the greatness of America and the solutions to her problems begin here with your people, not in Washington, D.C.
All right, welcome to the 1819 podcast. My name is Phil Williams. I'm the Chief Policy Officer and General Counsel for the Alabama Policy Institute. If you're not familiar with API, I encourage you to find out more. You can find us at www.alabamapolicy.org, where all the things that are conservative can be found to help you with that water cooler talk. I mean, listen, if you're into free markets, strong families, limited government, those are the kind of things that API has been fighting for 30 years. And come on and join us. It's a fight worth having. Today, we're going to be talking about a subject near and dear to my heart, and that's school choice. And we're going to dive in here in just a minute with a longtime friend and someone who has been an advocate for school choice in this state for quite a while. Representative Charlotte Meadows now represents House District 74. She was first elected in 2019 and currently serves on the House Education Policy Committee, as well as the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee in the State House here in Alabama. Charlotte, welcome to the 1819 podcast. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's really a pleasure to be with you and an honor to be on the API podcast. So thank you for asking.
Absolutely. Well, you know, and I've known you as a school choice advocate since before you were in the State House. And you got elected. That was a special election, I believe, wasn't it, in 2019?
It was a special in 2019, but I was working for an organization when we first met called Students First, and they're no longer active in Alabama. But what they were working to do was to always, in every policy, put the needs of students first. And that's something that I go back to my days with Students First, and I think of, okay, is this going to be what's best for the students? Obviously, you have to consider teachers and parents and the other adults in the building, but if you always look at what is going to be the best thing that we can do, from funding to whatever policy you're setting up, what's going to be the best outcome for students, then I think you're on a pretty straight path.
Man, I wish everybody would think like that. And unfortunately, they don't. And in fact, I think, you know, one of the things that I've said many times is when it comes to our state education budget, if you believe that the dollars, those tax dollars are there for the system, oh, okay, well, that's certainly, you know, gears your thinking. If you believe, though, and I believe rightfully, that those tax dollars are there to educate the child, it changes the whole perspective on what you do with it.
You're absolutely right. I had that very conversation with a colleague last week. There's a number of bills that have to do with what I consider school choice in the State House right now. And of course, they're all pretty much coming before our committee or up with Ways and Means Education. But I asked him, I said, well, you're really thinking about what's best for your systems, not what's best for your students. And it's, you know, that's unfortunately the way we've been trained for the last 50 or 60 years. The teachers union has been very powerful in Alabama. And of course, they are there to protect teachers. And nothing wrong with having an organization there to protect teachers. But they got so powerful that they were overriding the thinking about what's best for students. So, you know, when it comes to school choice, I would even say that a lot of people in Alabama don't even understand why it's so important that we better educate our kids. And it's been several years, actually in the last probably 10, 11 years, maybe 12 years, we've had 4 different assessments that our state has used to measure academic growth for students. And when I was 2010, it was the ARMT, Alabama Reading Math Test or something. Then it became something else, Performance Series. Then there was another one in there. And now we're using ACAP. Last year was the first year, should have been the first year for ACAP. And of course, we didn't do any testing because of COVID. We got a waiver. This year, we're encouraging all school systems and all students to take the ACAP. We'll get those results this summer. But the fact is we've been using the NAEP in Alabama for a number of years, probably more than 20 at least. And the NAEP scores show that our students are dead last in some areas.
Absolutely. And I mean, dead last, 50th out of 50 states. But if you break the categories down, I think in math, I think we were 52 because we were
Right.
behind Puerto Rico and the overseas Department of Defense schools.
Right.
And that's horrible. And
And
it's doing our kids no service whatsoever. Here's another thing too.
we can't continue like that. It's devastating.
We can't. I mean, in fact, it's the old, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That's where we are. And I remember looking at the numbers not too long ago when the dead last thing really hit us for officially. We can't say the inside joke used to always be, well, thank God for Mississippi. Well, Mississippi outranks us now. And Mississippi, by the way, spends less per student than we do. And so those who say we don't fund education enough, explain to me then why we have 8 states that outrank us who spend less than us. Apparently money's not the issue. It's got to be a curriculum issue. It's got to be a choice issue.
I mean, to me, it's never been about funding. I mean, some problems can be resolved with more money, but the basic problem in Alabama is that our kids are not learning. And until you can convince me scientifically that the kids born in Alabama have smaller brains than the kids born in Mississippi and every other state, then I think it's something else that we're doing. Because I believe that our kids are born with an ability to learn. So then you have to look at, yes, some of our kids don't come to school with great home choices and home options with parents that are highly supportive. But we also are not doing near the job we should be doing in training our teachers in best practices and how to reach the needs of every student.
No, that's exactly right. And there are powerhouses in every aspect of intellectual society that has come from Alabama. There are people who have risen above the public school standards to do great things. And we do have shining points in the state. I mean, the space program. Now, people will say, oh, they imported the intelligence. No, they didn't. Not all of it. Some of it, but you got people like Condoleezza Rice, who's from Alabama. You got great thinkers in the legal system. You got this anyway, on and on. But I agree with you. I think that we are underselling the capabilities of Alabama students, though, as a whole, and we are keeping the status quo by limiting the opportunities to really reach for a quality education.
Well, and that's where I believe that, and we can go back a little bit in time and talk about the history of school choice in Alabama. But if parents have an opportunity to choose where they want to send their student, and thankfully our family was able to do that because we have enough financial means that our zip code did not determine the school that our children went to. So initially, all 3 of our children started out in private schools. We went through several different private school systems. And then our oldest one transitioned to a magnet school in Montgomery. And then the other 2, soon after, in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years, followed through the magnet system. But there again, that magnet schools are a choice. Your traditional public schools are a choice. At the time, that was really the only choices in Alabama: private school, public school, magnet school. In 2013, the legislature, and of course you were a big part of that then, famously voted in the middle of the night, as they say, for the first school choice bill, the AAA, the Alabama Accountability Act. It started out being called school flexibility.
One of my favorite days in my 8 years in the Senate. Absolutely. One of my favorites.
I can understand, because I was actually driving to Birmingham for some kind of meeting up at the library up in Birmingham and got a phone call, turn around, go back. I'm like, what? Well, they've added this, that, and the other to the Flexibility Act. I was like, you're kidding. The Democrats are going to have a fit with that. And they're like, they are, turn around, go back.
There's still video on YouTube of the floor fight in the Senate. And I'm pretty sure, if I recall right, Del Marsh was at the podium just having a complete yelling match with the Democrats who were having a meltdown. And I'm standing right behind Del yelling, get him, Del, get him. But it was one of my favorite nights. Well, let me ask you this, though, because I want to get to one of your current bills that deals with the Accountability Act here in just a minute. But before I do that, if you could wave a magic wand, Charlotte Meadows, just in and of her own self, could say, here is the ideal school choice for Alabama, what would it be? Oh, she's pondering. I can see her on Zoom right now. She is
honestly, I think Del Marsh's open enrollment bill is a stab in the right direction.
I agree.
If you could really if I could wave a magic wand, I would say, okay, let's give every child or every family X number of dollars and they can choose what school they want to go to. And I guess that's called a voucher system, or it could be called a savings account or something like that. It would be my opinion that if you give parents good information about what schools are going to be, what schools are working, and they know their kids, even poor parents know their kids enough to know that what kind of school. And I'll give you a great example at Lead Academy, which is the only charter school in Montgomery right now. We've got 454 students whose parents have self-selected to come to a charter school, which really had a lot of risk because we're brand new. I mean, and you put anything brand new on the street, there's a certain amount of risk that it will not succeed. So those parents took a big leap of faith to bring their kids. And actually, they do have to bring them. We don't provide transportation.
Well, let's go down that road for a minute, Charlotte, because you were one of the founders of Lead Academy, which, like you said, is one of the few charter schools in Alabama right now. You're in the Montgomery area, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Give us the elevator pitch for Lead Academy. I mean, what separates y'all from the pack?
The fact that we do not offer tenure to our teachers means that if a teacher is doing something that we just cannot fathom, then we can ask them to leave. At the end of the year, we do look at every teacher's performance and make a decision as to whether or not they're going to get rehired for the next year. Initially, I mean, our first year was the 2019-2020 school year, and we had 2 principals, and we're on the 3rd one now. So the leadership of the school is critical to the success of the school. But if you don't have the leadership that you need, a charter school can very quickly pivot to make changes. We also released the charter management organization that was working with us. So that was another decision that we decided after a couple of months. They're not doing us any favors here. We're not getting what we're paying for. We are able to run the school a lot more like a business in terms of every dollar has to count and has to be focused on what it's supposed to be doing. And we actually, charter schools in Alabama currently get really no local funding. So we're dependent on just the state and federal dollars.
So you said have roughly 450 students, and what are they, K through 12, K through 8?
No, this year there's K through 6. We started with K through 5 and added 6th grade this year.
Well, that's a pretty good size elementary school then, to have 450 students.
We started out with 360 students, and we'll be growing through the next several years until we reach 12th grade with 1,248 students.
What's your recollection right now of your teacher-student ratio in the classrooms, roughly?
Typically have 24 students in a classroom.
Okay.
The ratio of teachers to students is actually probably about 13 to 1, because we've got what you call special teachers, art, music, special ed, and we have about 5 administrators in the building.
Well, that's great.
And those are our central office. I mean, we have a principal and assistant principal, and they're pretty focused on students. And then we have a executive director, a CSFO, and a secretarial type person, administrative.
I'm sure this past year has been a little bit more difficult with all of the COVID restrictions and everything, but people can't see right now, but you're laughing as I say that.
I am laughing. When you said a little bit more difficult, I mean, it's been, but it's also been very helpful to me because being on education policy, I'm very aware of what other schools have had to deal with and focus on. And last year in July, we told our teachers, you are essential workers. We are going to give the opportunity to all of our families to come to school in person. And so we started out with about 50% of our families in person and about 50% staying home doing virtual. After the first 9 weeks, that probably went to about 75-25. So more kids came back to school. And then this last 9 weeks, we probably have 15% that are still virtual. And those are basically parents that are afraid of what the kids might bring home to the parent or the grandparent or whoever might be living in the house with them.
Well, and I guess the most important question of all is, how are you seeing student achievement right now at Lead Academy?
Phil, we can get deep in the weeds here, but we actually started out this year doing a nationally normed reference test called NWEA MAP. And we did that in, I believe, October, and then again in February. And then we'll do that again the end of May or middle of May before school gets out. This week, we're currently given the ACAP. So we do have a good bit of testing right now, but we're trying to see where our kids are in relation to, where they should have been. Of course, we know that they were out of school for 8 weeks, 9 weeks last year, and between the end of March or middle of March and end of May. Our kids are showing, based on the NWEA, we're showing that our kids are learning. Now, I can't say with certainty where they are compared to all the other kids in the state, but we can say that they're on par with kids around the country, which actually is a better barometer, in my opinion. So,
yeah, and when you consider that Alabama's dead last, that is a pretty good barometer.
I mean, I'm optimistic that our mission to improve education for this group of kids is working. We're not doing anything radically different. What we have really focused on in the building is trying to make sure that the teachers have the tools they need to teach the kids. Professional development for those who need it. We've signed up with Project Lead the Way. Are you familiar with that?
I am, yeah.
And that's really what we're using for our science curriculum. And that's a hands-on approach to, and it's grade level specific.
Yeah. The personal disclosure here, my daughter-in-law was a Project Lead the Way teacher.
Well, then you probably understand it better than I do. But
yeah.
And we signed up with them last year and started that curriculum this current school year. We're excited about what we're moving to do, but it has been a very challenging situation with several changes in leadership, which is not unusual when it comes to a new building, but it is what it is.
Well, and thank you for what you're doing. I mean, charter schools are one aspect of the limited amount of school choice that we do have in Alabama. But that being said, let's go back to the Accountability Act, and I want to talk for the last few minutes of our time together about your bill that's currently pending in the State House. So for those who aren't familiar, the Alabama Accountability Act, like Charlotte mentioned, was first passed in 2013. It's been amended a couple of times since then. But the reality is what the Accountability Act does is it sets standards for what qualifies as a failing school in Alabama. It also says, to use Charlotte's phrase, if you are in a certain zip code, that is not the sole determinant of whether or not you have to stay in that school. And it then provides an opportunity for a tax credit for companies or businesses or individuals who provide monies for scholarships to help these kids get out of a failing situation and into one that is better suited for their needs educationally. So that being said, there's a $30 million cap on the amount of tax credit that could be available.
Right.
Which does relate to education trust fund funds. But the truth is, it has been a greatly successful program. Although in the last year, there was some confusion among CPAs related to federal issues that diminished some people recognizing they could take advantage of it for scholarships. So I understand that right now you've got HB 559, I believe it is.
Right.
Which is a House bill in the state legislature, currently stuck in committee. You had a public hearing last week.
We had a public hearing. We're not even meeting this week, so the soonest it'll be voted on will be next week. And I'm not, I'm optimistic that we can get a favorable report and then get it through the, House floor and then on to the Senate. But it's a bigger deal than I first thought, because we've got people that are opponents to the bill kind of coming out of the woodwork saying this takes public dollars away from public schools, which is not true. The cap is still only $30 million. The public schools this year have gotten so much more money from the federal government, from CARES money, that there's no way they can miss $30 million. And we're talking billions. Alabama's getting a couple of $1 billion in education.
On top of the usual appropriations, which is going to be like, what, $7.8 billion this year?
Correct. So, for the between 4,000 and 5,000 students that are part of that, the AAA, who get those scholarships, this changes their lives. And we had a couple of young men, or a couple of children, students, that came and testified last week about the changes, and two mothers that came and talked about how it changed their family and changed the trajectory. So, these are students who are in a poverty situation, who don't have the opportunity to go to a private school, who would not be able to afford to change schools. And by and large, they've been in a school that is deemed failing by the state of Alabama. Free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, means that every student should have the chance to learn. But when you know that you're putting a student or a whole series of students in a failing school, how do you even justify that? That, to me, should be unconstitutional. And yet,
it's also a leadership issue, in my opinion. It really gets down to continuing to let it happen is an abomination.
Well, and so the last several years, in fact, only 1 year since 2013 have we met that $30 million cap. And it was the year that, I believe it was 2018, the federal government had some specific tax benefits for contributing to the AAA, to one of the scholarship granting organizations. Since then, the market goes up and down. Parents or taxpayers have more money or less money based on the economy. Every year we look at, are we going to get the 30 million? And when we don't, that means somebody's scholarship isn't isn't going to happen, or as what happened this past year, because there was such a decline in revenues coming into the program, many of the students had their scholarship cut in half.
So what does your bill do to help amend the Alabama Accountability Act to make it more effective? Well,
currently the law sets up a program so that you and I can give 50% of our taxable dollars to the state of Alabama, to this SGO. All it does is say that we can then give 75% of our dollars and it changes it from, if you have a huge amount of tax dollars, which I've never gotten anywhere close to this, but it currently says you can give 50,000. It changes it to 75,000.
Okay. And doesn't it also allow for the tax credit to carry forward?
Yes.
So if you don't use it all in 1 year, you can carry it forward into your next year's or maybe 3 years tax liability.
That's the other thing it does, is take it so that the deadline to spend those tax dollars doesn't occur 12 months after the current bill says 12 months after you send the money, they have to spend the money. So this allows them to hold on to it for a little bit longer, so that if there's a downturn, if they had a savings plan, or they have a little bit of a savings money in their back pocket, they could pull from it to make sure that the students are made whole every year.
Okay. Well, so basically what we're doing is not drawing on more state funds or putting more education trust fund dollars into a program that the teachers union hates. We are just literally allowing those who make use of the program to have a more effective use of it, and to also expand the capabilities of those who donate to it.
Right. We know there's a donor base of people who support this. This would just allow that group of people to give more of their tax dollars, or to direct more of their tax dollars to this program.
Well, God forbid we should ever stand in the way of somebody trying to help a kid in a failing school. Well, Representative Charlotte Meadows, you've been one of my favorite school choice heroes for quite a while, and your work is still continuing. Thank you so much for not only doing what you do with Students First and for fighting for Lead Academy and all those things, but for then stepping into the ugly arena of state politics and just go ahead and just put it all out there.
I've recently realized how ugly it can be, but that's okay. We're going to continue to fight the good fight. One day every child will learn, and when that day happens, my work will be done. But in the meantime, I have a 6-month-old grandbaby now that I'm going to continue fighting to make sure she has the opportunity to get the best education we can provide.
Wow, what a great note to end on. That's a State Representative Charlotte Meadows, who is a champion for school choice, and by the way, just more of a statesman in general. This has been the 1819 podcast. I'm Phil Williams with the Alabama Policy Institute. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to know more about API, if you want to be able to have a at-length conversation about conservative values in the state of Alabama, go to www.alabamapolicy.org. That's alabamapolicy.org. And thanks for tuning in.
This episode of 1819 is brought to you by the Alabama Policy Institute. For 30 years, API has been fighting for limited government, free markets, and strong families. Learn more by visiting alabamapolicy.org.